What's going on, Vikings fans? Welcome to the Vikings Now by Chat Sports. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, ESPN did their way too early power rankings for the 2026 season, and the Vikings actually came in at 23rd on this list, but they did give a three-word description for each team's offseason. What do they need to do? And everyone pretty much agrees on what Minnesota should do this offseason. And ESPN's three words coming in from Kevin Seifert were quarterback and leadership. So we'll talk about the quarterback position, and then we'll dive into the leadership aspect on the tail half of today's show. But obviously, the quarterback spot is the biggest topic of conversation around the Minnesota Vikings. So this one is no shocker to me, is what Kevin had to say. Saying the Vikings already had a big task ahead of them this offseason. At the very least, they need to upgrade their quarterback depth to give them a better hedge against J.J. McCarthy's performance and injury history than they had in 2025. So I thought the interesting nugget here on what Seifert wrote up was this part. At the very least, they need to upgrade their quarterback depth. So I think bare minimum, the Vikings are going to go out there and bring in a high-end veteran backup quarterback. Because even if they still believe that J.J. McCarthy will be the guy, they still want to give some injury assurance there. Because no matter what you think about J.J. McCarthy, if he can be that guy, if he can be a franchise quarterback, we can all agree the biggest red flag on his performance so far in the NFL is his injuries. This guy's only played in 10 games and has finished 8 of them. He has finished 8 games since becoming a Minnesota Viking back in early 2024. So the injury history is definitely the biggest part where I'm like, okay, that needs to get shored up. Well, how do you shore it up? You bring in a high-end backup like one of these guys. Now, I don't know which one is the best option on this list. I have different thoughts on every single one of these guys, and we have gone in depth on every one a lot during this offseason. But obviously, you got Kirk Cousins there. You got a guy like Derek Carr who could potentially unretire for the right situation, which obviously the Vikings will be, linked to Derek Carr if that ever heats up. You got a guy like Joe Flacco, not as talented as Carr or Cousins, but could serve that high-end backup option. Same can be said with Marcus Mariota. Then the polarizing choice would be Geno Smith. I really have no interest in Geno Smith. Doesn't really feel like a Vikings culture guy, which leads me to this. I mean, Kirk Cousins is feeling likely right now. I think there is a good chance that Kirk Cousins is brought in this offseason, and he is the backup kind of guy they bring in to battle it out with J.J. McCarthy and let the best man win during training camp. Now, I think the question is with a guy like Kirk Cousins and bringing him in, is 10-7 a wild card weekend loss a successful season for the Vikings next year? Or are their expectations still where they were before this season, where they're expecting to go on a deep playoff run, where they're expecting to win a playoff game? Is now the expectation brought back down to just, hey, making the playoffs, Kevin O'Connell going 10-7 with a top 5 defense, that's a successful season. If that is, if the answer to this question is yes, then Kirk Cousins feels very likely. And I think overall we can all agree on this. The Vikings aren't QB hell right now. I mean, this has just been a demoralizing season as a fan, where you're looking around at Sam Darnold winning the Super Bowl. Daniel Jones looked great early on this season. And now the Vikings are left with a huge question mark at their quarterback position, where you have J.J. McCarthy, where, yes, he has shown flashes, but the guy can't stay on the football field. He's incredibly inaccurate on certain spots, and he just doesn't look like an NFL quarterback at this point, and especially considering you had 2 high-end starters in your organization last year. You let them both walk. Vikings are definitely in quarterback hell. Now, I think the high-risk, high-reward option for the Vikings at the QB spot, and why I think if the answer to that question I asked previously was no, we're 10-7 and a playoff loss, doesn't cut it for this ownership group, then I think Kyler could be on the table. Because Kyler Murray, even though his floor is not as high as a lot of these other guys, just because of how, again, polarizing he is, there's no doubt that the ceiling with Kyler would be incredibly high. Where if he turns it around, if he starts living up to that first overall pick, draft pedigree, where he could go on a playoff run and he could win multiple games with this Vikings organization. I fully believe that. If we get the best version of Kyler with this organization, Jefferson, the whole 9, this team can be very successful. Now, the low-risk, low-reward option would be Mac Jones. Where similar to Mac Jones, can be said with Kirk Cousins, is 10-7 good enough for this Vikings organization to be like, you know what, that's our guy. That's, good enough to save our jobs and to keep this fan base happy. I don't think Mac Jones and Kirk Cousins, I think a lot of Vikings fans would be a little pissed off if they go in that direction, where I would rather take a risk, roll the die a little bit, go Kyler Murray, or maybe even a guy like Anthony Richardson. Could he be an option? Him and J.J. McCarthy are very similar. They play the game differently, but they're very similar in terms of how they started their careers. Both dealt with a lot of injuries. Both have shown a lot of flashes, and both have looked terrible in certain spots when they have been healthy. So if you just have J.J. Anthony Richardson, you just hope one of those two figures it out. Like, that's another high-risk, high-reward option, which I just think the Vikings, with where they're at, I mean, never winning a Super Bowl, haven't been to the Super Bowl this century. Like, you got to get risky here. And I think you were risky this past offseason. Now don't go the safe route. Like, kind of continue rolling that 8 ball down and take a risk on one of these guys. But you guys let me know, who do you think is going to be QB1 next season for the Vikings? I really have no idea. I think I'm leaning Kyler Murray. It's just I think the front office might head in that direction, but I truly don't know. If it's J.J. McCarthy, wouldn't be shocked. If it's Kirk, wouldn't be shocked. If it's Geno Smith, I wouldn't be shocked. If it's Mac Jones, I wouldn't be shocked. I have no idea. So you guys call it for me down below. Who do you think will be QB1 next season? Now, we'll dive into the leadership aspect of the Vikings organization here in a second. But let me tell you guys about today's sponsor. That is Factor Meals. Now, head to factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off and plug in promo code VikingsChat50 off to get hooked up with 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for 1 whole year. Now, if you guys want to eat better but don't have the time or energy to make it happen, Factor doesn't ask you to meal prep or follow recipes. It just removes the entire problem. 2 minutes, real food, done. Factor is already made by chefs, designed by dietitians, and delivered to your door. You heat it for 2 minutes, and you're eating. They have lean proteins, colorful vegetables, whole food ingredients, healthy fats, the stuff you'd make if you had the time. And I love Factor because they have no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, and no refined seed oils. I love the Texas Cheddar Burger, the blackened salmon, some great options, but they have over 100 rotating weekly meals. So just head on over to factormeals.com/VikingsChat50 off and use that promo code VikingsChat50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box, plus free breakfast for 1 year. Now, this offer is only valid for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. All right, so Kevin Seifert was also writing up about the Vikings' leadership in the organization, obviously with GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah being let go. A lot of question marks on who's really calling the shots in this organization for this offseason. This is what Seifert had to say. But after firing general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah on January 30th, they'll have to address that need with an interim leadership structure led by Rob Brzezinski, their longtime executive vice president of football ops. Adofo-Mensah's replacement isn't likely to be named until after the 2026 draft, putting the franchise in an extended stretch of limbo. So I think it's pretty obvious, and the Vikings will never come out here and say this. We'll never get a report confirming this is true, but I think it's very simple. I think KOC is calling the shots offensively, and Brian Flores is calling the shots defensively. And I'm sure the draft will come around. I wouldn't be shocked knowing the way this Vikings organization has been run. Hey, first round, pick number 18, KOC's got a guy, Brian Flores has a guy. I wouldn't be shocked if those two just play rock, paper, scissors and try to figure out who gets that selection. But I do think in terms of personnel, who's bringing in who, like KOC and Flores will have the shots in terms of who the Vikings bring in or who the Vikings possibly let go. And then Rob Brzezinski will come in, and he'll just help manipulate the cap. He has been doing this for a very long time, which is why, like in terms of a scouting perspective and a drafting perspective, I still think losing Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was an addition there. So I think Brzezinski would do a fine job manipulating the cap, just like he always does. I mean, the Vikings have always been set up well financially, even when they seem like they're in a hole like they are this year. They're going to be able to get their way out of it. But you could also look at the Vikings potentially trying to steal George Paton from the Denver Broncos. That's been reported over the last couple of weeks where his contract is expiring with Denver. So maybe after this season, they just let Brzezinski ride it out, and then they go out and pick up a George Paton. Where George Paton, talking about an elite drafter, I mean, he has been just that. I mean, picking up Pat Surtain, obviously a top 10 pick. You should hit on those, but he ended up picking him. Quinn Myers, you got an all-pro guard in round 3. Jonathan Cooper, a very good edge rusher in round 7. Nick Pedino, an all-pro edge rusher in round 2. Luke Wattenberg, Marvin Mims, Riley Moss, J.L. Skinner, Javonte Williams. These have been all George Paton draft picks since 2021. That's how you build a team. You build through the draft. The Seahawks and Eagles have proven that over the last couple of years, but also you got to hit on your extensions. You got to hit on the guys you bring in during free agency. Well, he's kept a lot of his guys. He gave Jonathan Cooper a 7th-round pick, 4 for $60. Quinn Miners, 4 for $80. Zach Allen got a good deal. Pat Surtain's on a good deal. Nick Benito is on a fantastic deal, and same with Malcolm Roach. He's on a good deal as well. So I think for the Vikings for this season, It's probably going to be Rob Brzezinski calling the shots up until next offseason. But the next offseason, if George Payton doesn't have that extension, watch out for him being an option the Vikings seriously target, because clearly he's got some good ties to this Vikings organization coming from Minnesota in the past. But so this all gets back to, for the Vikings, and why this draft has so much pressure on it, is it is just absolutely huge, man. I mean, if the Vikings have another failed draft class, like, we could be talking about this team being in the gutter, where we could be talking about this team, potentially trading to Jefferson, completely reselling or resetting the clock and selling a lot of guys at the deadline. If they don't at least get 3 to 4 immediate day one impact starters from this draft, you have to nail pick 18. If that isn't a defensive or offensive starter from day one, this Vikings coaching staff and this front office, I mean, their seats are already hot. They will even get warmer as this whole process goes on. So they got to nail the 2026 draft. But you guys let me know. Name your dream draft target for the Minnesota Vikings. I got a couple guys in mind. Like, I like the Toledo safety, Emmanuel McNeil Warren. I'm kind of out of love with Kenyon Sadiq now as the process is going on. But, like, I love either of the DBs, Vance Ordelane or Jamon McCoy. You guys let me know down below who's your dream draft target for the Minnesota Vikings. We'll get on out of here. As always, let's go Vikes.